But I would love to introduce Susanna Styron. Right? Oh, there she is. You can stay back there. You can stay back there. Susanna Styron is a writer and director for film and television and documentary filmmaker whose latest documentary short, My Father's Name, is on the 2024-25 festival circuit right now. And it was lovely to see on the Where to See tab on your website, Hutchins Center was first. It was very nice. Susanna's debut feature, Sony Pictures' Shadrach, starring Harvey Keitel and Andy McDowell, premiered at the Venice Film Festival and was one of the New York press critic Armand White's top 10 films of the year. Susanna's other documentary credits as writer-director include 9/12, From Chaos to Community, In Our Own Backyards, and Suspended Sentence. She was an associate producer of FDR for ABC TV's documentary division, Close Up. Her personal essays have appeared in the Yale Review, Spin Magazine, the New York Times, and Real Simple Magazine. Susanna serves on the Executive Committee of the Writers Guild Initiative and the Special Projects Committee of the Directors Guild of America. She currently has projects in development with the Levinson Fontana Company, Cinetic Media, and EP showrunner Matt Lopez. And we are so happy to have you here and have all of you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the screen.
Give it up for Susanna, ladies and gentlemen. Well, welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Are we okay? Is my mic okay?
Oh, I need to get my little cushions. Yeah, thank you. My back will be deeply appreciative in 3 hours. Good. This is the second time we've done this. We did it on Martha's Vineyard, and we had many, many discussions. Well, Susanna was conceiving, editing, producing this very powerful documentary. A lot of arguments. I really pushed hard about several things. So before we engage in an exchange and then open it up, if that's okay, with you, to all of our friends here, I'd like for you to make a statement about anything that you're feeling.
A statement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge two of our team members are here, two executive producers, Roderick Spencer. Wait, where did Connie? Oh, and Connie Royster back there.
All right. Connie Royster is the niece of Justice Judge Constance Baker Motley. And how about that? And she's named for Constance Baker Motley.
We also almost had, but couldn't come at the last minute, the cinematographer, Stephen McCarthy, who shoots Finding Your Roots. And this was purely coincidental because Stephen's shot for me before in earlier documentaries. I didn't even know he'd done Finding Your Roots until we were shooting this.
He's my Irish cousin.
Right. I mean, the only statement I can make is I'm so grateful to be able to show this to people. Thank you all for being here, and to thank you for every step of the way. I couldn't have done this without you, and holding my feet to the fire, and which was what I wanted. Just grateful to be able to have the film start to get out in the world and start conversations like hopefully the one we're about to have and that other people will carry away talking about.
Well, there's somebody here who looks like a famous actor, but I can't remember her name. What the hell is she doing here? I mean, who is that? Oh, you want to introduce your friend whose name I saw in the credits?
My friend Alfre Woodard, who is my dear friend and supporter of this film and godmother to my oldest daughter, and been friends for 40-something years. Yeah.
Let's welcome Alfre Woodard. Now, last time I saw her was at Oprah Winfrey's house. This is a true story. Before COVID, and her car was so nice I've been thinking about that car every day, and I'm going to get one sooner or later. Well, I'm going to get one sooner or later. Welcome. It's so nice to see you, dear. So you're a filmmaker, an accomplished filmmaker, one whose work I admire very much. How did you find this story, or rather, how did this story find you?
Okay, so I wasn't looking to tell this story. I had been trying to make a film about a woman named Roxy Bolton, who was a trailblazing feminist, who was sort of an unspoken hero of the women's movement. She happened to grow up in Duck Hill, Mississippi. And when she died, in her obituary, it mentioned the fact that one of the reasons she became an activist, because she was also very active in civil rights in and around Miami, where she lived, was because she had witnessed a lynching at the age of 10 in her hometown. So that was the Duck Hill lynching. I knew this about her. She wasn't alive by the time I was making this film, and I couldn't ask her about it. I asked all the people I interviewed, and nobody knew about it. And the fact is, she was a very secretive person, which is the reason I ultimately couldn't finish making a film about her, because she had too many secrets to crack. But when Jan was doing her research, trying to find out everything she knew after the murder of George Floyd, when it came, she's picked up again and she had the internet available to her. And she found Roxy's obituary, and she found me through that. And she asked me if I had any more information about that lynching, and I didn't, but I heard her story and I was just so struck by it. And to be honest, the first thing about it that really struck me was this idea of what do you do when you find out something so horrible about somebody you love so much? So that the kind of most raw personal aspect of it was what I first connected to. But then, of course, the more I delved into the story, I mean, clearly it couldn't be told outside of its, historical context. And so it became sort of this dual story. Well, and then I learned more about her, and I really started to understand what the process had been for her about her understanding about her own whiteness and her own unconscious racism.
Mm-hmm. It's said that one makes a film 3 times. Once in the treatment, once in the shooting, and then again in the editing. How did this what we saw, differ from what you conceived initially?
Well, originally, so this started during COVID, during the lockdown. So I first just recorded a Zoom interview with her. And I wasn't able to actually meet her and be with her in person for a while. So I conceived of it based on what she told me about her story. And I made a little 10-minute reel, which I showed to Skip. He was the first person I showed it to, and with this question of, can I make this film? I mean, as a white person, making a film about a white person that deals with, issues of atrocities perpetrated on Black people, like, is that okay? Is there a reason to, is it okay to do this? And he totally said, yes, you need to keep doing this.
Yeah, I have no tolerance for essentialism of that nature. There are only smart people and not so smart people willing to work hard and people not willing to work hard. And those kind of people don't come in colors. So you can't ever capitulate to that sort of censorship. If someone said to me, I have a PhD in English literature from the University of Cambridge, and if someone had said to me there that I couldn't write a dissertation on John Milton because I'm not of Anglo-Saxon descent, I would have said they were a racist and hoped that you would join me in protesting. Well, if that's true, the converse has to be true. So you don't have to look like a subject to master the subject. You don't have to be black to play Othello, or you don't have to be white to play Lear, you know? I mean, we have to throw all that in the trash. And so the first thing I said without even thinking about it was, of course, you have the right to make this film. But why would you, of all the people I know, why would you be so concerned about that subject, Miss Styron?
Okay, wait a second. We have two questions going here. I'll diverge and answer that one because I know that you want me to address the fact that my father wrote the Confessions of Nat Turner, and he got a lot of blowback for being a white man writing in the voice of a black man. So I mean,
there was a book published, 10 Black Writers Respond. I remember I was a sophomore at Yale, and when he came to campus, when I first saw him. I never dreamed I would get to know him, but I did. He was a friend. I admired him, and I love your mother.
So do I. He was absolutely devastated by the attacks on him, and he was really taken by surprise. And I completely understand both sides of it. And I never would have imagined that I would put myself possibly in a similar position. I am descended from slave owners. I do know that. I was not looking to tell a story about that. It didn't even hit me until long into the process, the parallels to my father, the parallels to me as a storyteller between me and my father, and also the parallels between Jan and me as me being descended from slave owners. Mm-hmm. So that kind of came weirdly after the fact.
Yeah, I pointed that out too.
But one of the things that happened in terms of how it changed was, so I finally was able to go film her. The pandemic was not over, but I could go in her house. But she lives in a log cabin. She lives in like a very small house. She's a bit of a recluse. And nobody had been in her house except her kids. And so I just brought Stephen McCarthy, and he's a wizard, and he did sound, lighting, everything. It was just him and me. We were the only two people on the crew. And we went to her house, and we filmed an interview with her, and it was really great. And she had all of the source materials. She had the New York Times. She had the local papers that reported the murder of the guy that led to the arrest of McDaniels and Towns and then led to the lynching. So we filmed those. I took pictures of them, got back to the editing room, and she told me that 2 black men had committed the murder. And I was looking at the source materials, and I realized there were no witnesses. Mm-hmm. And I went, wait a second, how do you know it was 2 black people? So I talked to her some more. I called her and I talked to her, and we talked about it. And I also realized that the interview was very much, this happened, this happened, this happened. And she was letting her family off the hook. She was justifying her uncle, saying, the justice was done, because she was very invested in still feeling okay about him. And she was having a hard time with that. And so she was amazing, because I said to her, look, I think I need to come back and go a little deeper with you. And I have some tough questions. And do you think you can go there? And she said, bring it on. I'll answer anything. I'm, an open book, and I want to understand. All I want is to understand things better. So I went back, and we did a second interview, which Stephen brilliantly made look the same as the first one. And we got into these tough questions that she realized that she had bought the story, that she herself hadn't questioned, who did it. She'd seen those headlines, she'd read the papers, and it never, she was protected in a way against it registering because it was such a kind of a shock. And then we talked about how she really was letting her family off the hook. And that was hard for me to push her on because you don't want to alienate or shut down someone you're interviewing. But she was amazing about it, and she was fascinated herself. So that happened. Then I started showing it in terms of the change, a significant change. I was doing feedback screenings, which you do when you're making a documentary. You make a cut and you show it to people and you say, what do you think? And you get feedback. And I would show it to filmmakers and I would show it to friends who weren't filmmakers. And I showed it to many Black colleagues and friends. I wanted to have a Black editor. I knew I wanted a Black editor because editors are critical to the storytelling process, and I needed that perspective. And so she did the first cut. She was great. We ran out of money. She had to take another job. I had to raise some more money. And then I was going to finish it, and I just realized I've been an editor, and I know how to edit, and I'm really good at storytelling in terms of editing. So I just thought, I'm just going to finish it myself. It's just too much trouble to have somebody else come in now. So I finished editing it. But so I had her perspective for a while. But what happened when I was almost finished with the film was my Black friends and colleagues would go, yeah, this is great, but I'm not your audience. I know all this. This is like, and I think you came into this conversation too. It was like, why are you so surprised? Why is she so surprised? Because white people are surprised. And then I felt like the critical element that needed to come in was that recognition that she's telling this story. This film is not expecting Black people to go, oh my God, who could ever believe that? Mm-hmm. And to acknowledge that difference and the fact and why. Like, why don't white people get this? Because our lives haven't been threatened, throughout history. So that was kind of the last piece of the puzzle that I interviewed her again about, and then it was done.
Do you think that the themes that are elevated in the finished film are those that you thought would be elevated when you began? And what are those themes, what were those themes, if there's a difference?
Well, I mean, really, partly this was, I went through kind of what she went through in the process of getting to know her story and figuring out how to tell it, and having a Black editor and having Black colleagues look at it was like, I was like her, like I'm a white Northern liberal. I'm not racist. I was raised, to have all the right values and that is true, and yet there is an aspect to, how the way we live in the world that was just, there was that unconscious element of the judgments you make, the assumptions you make, and so that became more part of the story. I didn't think it was going to be a story about unconscious racism among, supposedly liberal white people. I thought it was going to be a story about family secrets and the horrors of lynching, but it became so much about her finding her arc through it, and that was her arc, was to get to that point.
But who had the unconscious racism?
She did.
Well, how was she racist? She's sitting up there in Vermont, minding her business, feeling guilty about this lynching. And you call the lady a racist. You ought to be ashamed. Calling that nice lady a racist.
She called herself that.
Yeah, but that's all the white people, you know. That's the
Yeah.
white people confessing stuff they didn't do. How is this woman a racist?
Well, I think she would say that it's that unconscious aspect that you don't really identify as racism. Assumptions like, oh, the black kids were fine in school. They were happy.
Right.
Well, that looked that way to her because they had to act that way or their lives could be threatened. I mean, they put on, it's these assumptions that the world, that it's like the way it's for black people, the way it is for white people, if it looks that way.
Maybe the black kids at the reunion just like fried chicken and greens and candied yams and like James Brown and don't like the white country music to being played over that other reunion. That's fine.
I'm not even talking about the reunions. I'm talking about when they were in school.
Right.
Like, I don't know if anybody noticed this. This is very subtle, but in the archival footage of the high school, of the white kids and the black kids together.
All the black kids are laughing.
Yes, until the last 3 shots after she says we were wrong to think everything was fine. And those 3 shots, if you looked at them closely, which I did, and then the music also turns at that moment. You can see the black kids are like looking at the white kids to see if they're doing okay. And I mean, I don't expect anybody to get this consciously, but hopefully unconsciously. And then the last shot of the kid, the black kid in the automotive, in shop, and the white kid you saw that, takes his arm, and they're like just totally controlling this guy. So that was very purposeful, was to show that. Mm-hmm. And I just thought of another one, but I lost my train of thought.
Well, she presumed that
I know
that they were guilty.
So, for myself, here's
right.
In my own experience, here's one. This doesn't mean I'm racist, but this does mean I'm unconscious about my relationship to race and about how black people have to walk through the world. Mm-hmm. I have a friend named Keith McWhirter. He's a black documentary filmmaker. He's in my previous documentary. But so because that was about migraine disease, the neurological disease, and he's like this big, strong, gorgeous, like 6-foot black man who like gets migraines so badly that he will lie in the fetal position on the floor and cry. So that's why he was in my film. But I asked him to watch a cut of this. And he's one of the people who said to me, yeah, great, but I'm not your audience because duh, this is old news. But he told me a story that, sorry, I keep hitting my microphone, that shocked me because I'm white and I'm probably won't shock any of the black people in this room, especially the men, which is that he was walking down the street one night in New York City and he found himself alone in like a dark alleyway, walking behind a white woman. And he was scared. Mm-hmm. And he turned around and went the other way because her fear could endanger his life. And I just went, oh my God, and that, I think that's the thing, is that that's what I mean about assumptions and about, and the complacency of white people, because that white woman she wasn't in danger. She could have thought she was in danger just because he was a black man, but he ultimately would have been in greater danger because of that.
But that's the theme of Whistling Vivaldi.
I don't know that.
Oh, Whistling Vivaldi. Brent, what's Brent's, the New York Times columnist?
Stevens?
Brent Staples. Oh my God, when he says it, I forgot your name, Brent. He's won the Pulitzer Prize. He wrote he has a PhD in psychology, and he's worked at the editorial board for 30 years at the Times, and He, I think, 2 years ago got a Pulitzer Prize. But he wrote a column about whistling Vivaldi. That when you're walking down the street and you don't want white people to be afraid, you whistle Vivaldi, right? So they know you're not a regular Negro. You know, how many rapists are whistling Vivaldi? And then the psychologist Claude Steele, who's probably the leading African-American psychologist ever, who's a professor at Stanford, published a book called Whistling Vivaldi about disappointing expectations and refuting stereotypes proactively.
Yeah.
So it's
I
just
will
what your
read that.
friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just what your friend did.
Yeah.
And absolutely, it's a lot of work and a lot of stress. So why did you want to tell this story? I mean, your father's from Virginia, your mother from Maryland. You keep saying, and we're going to address it, you keep saying that the black people who you showed this to, so we know the story, which is not my reaction at all,
No.
but we're going to get to my reaction.
Yeah, that's
Which
important.
is totally counterintuitive. But your motivation, why did you want to tell this story? Your mom is from Maryland, your father's from Virginia, personally and politically, and given the post-George Floyd moment, what was it about this thing that resonated with you?
Well, I mean, I think it's very much what I was saying before about my father. I mean, that aspect of it was, you know, and I, it's interesting because I've seen it so many times and I've seen it with so many different audiences. And you see, I mean, the horrible thing about finishing a film is every time you see it, you see something you wish you had done differently.
Sure.
So there's that. But I also have feelings. I find I have new feelings sometimes. And in a recent screening, I just kind of realized that I've been carrying the knowledge that I'm descended from slave owners, you know, with a lot of shame my whole life, but I've buried it. I've ignored it. And, you know, in some way, I feel like Jan, like, what can I do about it? And, you know, I guess this film feels a little bit about doing something about it. Like when she says, I couldn't undo the past, but I had to do something. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, there's an element of
But why?
that.
I don't feel guilty about the crazy stuff my ancestors did. My ancestors, I'm sure, did. Everybody, I mean, I live with people's ancestors, okay? And everybody's got crazy people who did horrible things on their family tree. Why? Guilt is not heritable. Why do you feel guilty about the fact that people you didn't even know owned other human beings that you didn't know? I don't think that's good.
Okay, then I'll stop. No,
I might be the only one of 47 million black people who feels that way, but I do feel that way.
Actually, I said I didn't say I carry it with guilt. Uh-huh. I said I carry it with shame.
Okay.
And I think there's a difference. And I think there's a big, we've talked about this before. The other thing that, you know, I came to realize in the course of doing this is how not just unproductive, but counterproductive white guilt is. Because it makes it the other person's problem. That it, you know, that was also part of the real dance with framing it as accountability versus an apology. Like an apology requests and guilt requests some kind of absolution from the other person. It makes it the other person's work. And so, you know, that was a really important realization, and part of the story was to shift it from an apology, so she's not asking somebody to tell her it's okay, to accountability. So she's just saying, and this was her feeling. She wrote that letter because she, as she said, I just wanted to say it because it's true. And it was kind of the one thing she knew that she could think of that she could do. So I don't feel guilty, I guess. I didn't do it, but I feel ashamed of my ancestors that I didn't know, and I just feel that. I feel that.
I could take
and
that.
I feel
I
like
could understand
acknowledging
shame.
it and is the kind of the only way to be accountable for that.
But I think it's very important to distinguish between shame and guilt in the way that you did.
Yeah.
Because, you just can't be. There's a great passage to flip the script in Richard Wright's book, Black Power, which was published in 1954. And he interviewed Kwame Nkrumah, who was about to become the first president of the independent Republic of Ghana, right? So it's very much about Nkrumah. Ghana is the second African country to get its independence under colonialism, right? Ethiopia was independent forever. Liberia was created for returnees, African Americans. But in the colonial era, Sudan in 1956 and then Ghana in 1957. So it was a big deal and everyone knew it was coming. So Wright goes over to Ghana, the Gold Coast it was called then. Wasn't called Ghana. And he interviewed Nkrumah. And along the way, someone says, "What tribe are you from?" I mean, a Ghanaian, anachronistically. And Wright says, who was very angry, it's a very angry book, he's angry at these Africans. And he goes, "I have no idea because your ancestor sold my ancestor to the white man along the coast."
Wow.
Which is true. 99%.
Yeah.
You have to accept this. You can fight it all day long. You might not want to believe it. But 99% of the Africans sold into the slave trade were captured by African elites and merchants and sold to white elites along the coast. That's just a fact. The scene you saw in Roots never happened. Your ancestors out having a picnic one day, some white man jumps out of a bush, and they end up on a plantation in Mississippi. It didn't happen that way. I'm sorry it didn't, but it didn't. And I go to Africa all the time, and not a lot of people are feeling guilty about the role their ancestors played in all of us coming over here. So the attitudes of the slave traders is very different, black and white, in my experience. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty of the many debates that you and I had. When I first saw this, you tell the story. What did I say to you when I first saw this?
You said, "How does she know her father did anything? This doesn't seem fair to me. She doesn't have any proof about that."
He was 18 years old. There were at least 100 people, according to that one article. He's 18. When I watched it, we were on the vineyard. We summer on the vineyard together. So I watched this, and I focus on this woman's motivation. And I was going to be the hard ass because that's what friends are supposed to do, right? And I'm thinking, what is motivating this woman's, this story, why? Then when it got to the point where she published the letter, I thought that was way over the top, right? She got no responses. And I don't think she got a response from the black community. They go, what's wrong with this woman? The guy was 18 years old. Now imagine, I was thinking back, my mother's family. I grew up in Piedmont, West Virginia, where the Colemans lived. My mother was a Coleman. And she had 9 brothers. And she called them the boys till they died, right? So if the boys, half of them went away to college and the other half still lived around them. If they were gathering us all up, the cousins, to go and do something, we would have just gone along because that's what we were supposed to do. We went hunting together, we went fishing together. They would have gotten in the truck and they'd say, "Okay, get in the truck, we're going to some event." Now, what would have happened at the event? We would have been on the periphery. They would have engaged in the primary action, and we would have watched them, right? So it's not like what's wrong with that, but how did she know what role her father did? What choice did her father have as an 18-year-old when all these adults are going and definitely going to torture and kill these black guys? But what is his complicity? And what's her motivation for elevating his role to, when you listen to her, you think that he tied the barbed wire around them and held the blowtorch. But he probably didn't do any of that.
Okay, I'm going to answer that, but I'm
Okay.
also going to
And
speculate.
she don't know the answer.
I'm also going to speculate about what you. I mean, it's one thing for all the uncles to tell you to get in the car because you're going hunting or you're going, but it's another thing to to take you to instigate something that to kill somebody. I mean, if you were in a situation where you were watching somebody get killed,
Sure.
you might not feel. You might have a lot of resistance to that. That said, if being 18, you might not do anything about it. But what we do know, the whole way the title came about is the fact that nobody was named, and so we can't know anything for absolutely sure. But we know for a fact that this was a member of their family
Yes.
who was murdered.
Yep.
And we know from the family story that was the men in both families, the wife's family, the wife of the guy who was killed was the wife of the guy who was killed was her aunt's husband. So it was the brother-in-law of Jan's father. His brother-in-law
Was murdered.
Was murdered.
Right.
So he was a teenager. Then there were his parents, and then there was the grandfather.
Right.
And the men in the guy who was killed family and the wife's family, who was Jan's family, they, big family, the men got together. It makes perfect sense. That's
Right.
what would happen. The men got together.
Yes.
And they went to the courthouse, and they got a mob going, and they got
Yes.
people there to take them.
Right.
He, as she says, he was 18, which is a man in Mississippi at that time. I don't know, could he have said, no, I'm not going? Maybe, but
No.
probably not.
No.
But the other thing is...
But he couldn't have said, I don't want to go. That was impossible, too. He
Right.
had to go along.
Right. Ultimately, my feeling about it is, the two things. One is, what's her motivation? And the other is this fair to the father?
Right.
As far as, is it fair to the father? She puts the accountability on her family. There's pretty much no question that it was her family.
No question. No
yeah.
question about that.
Yeah. There are, and there are, yeah, so it's her family. But we get to that through her feelings about her father. And I think her motivation was that her heart was broken by this. And she was trying to find a way to put it back together. Her motivation to write the letter, she didn't come asking me to make a film about her.
No, I know.
She agreed at first reluctantly, but ultimately because she felt like it was better than the letter. It was like, write the letter, but if you have it in a movie, you're going to get
Sure.
that many more people.
Right.
But she was, she loved her father. It's not like she's trying to blame him for something he didn't do. She tried to prove he didn't. And I think it was very kind of, I don't know if honorable is the right word, but of her to go, you know what? I'm going to assume he did do this because that's what my heart is telling me. And I still love him. And I, carry the shame.
But she would have been on firmer ground if she'd said, Susanna, my grandfather lynched a black man, two
But
black
she
men.
didn't care about her grandfather. She cared about her father.
No, but I'm just talking about on a factual basis. So this were a court of law, right?
Yeah.
There's no way you could convict that 18-year-old, except he was there. right?
Uh-huh.
But there's no doubt in my mind that the grandfather would have been, the
Yeah.
older men would have played the primary role and the younger men a peripheral role. That just
So,
stands
yeah.
to reason, right?
Right. Okay.
It's
but,
too much to believe that 18-year-old was actively involved in the torture.
Right.
Isn't
okay.
it?
I don't think she implies that he was actively involved. I don't think the film
All the black people
implies.
said, no, the motherfuckers are guilty.
I think it's.
Guilty!
But you said to me too.
Y'all should be
You
ashamed.
said to me maybe he was just a bystander. Okay,
He was just standing there watching this horrible thing happen.
That's wrong. I mean, that's.
I'll call in you.
Well, okay. Oh yeah, we got to get to a Q&A.
Yeah. No, they don't have any rights.
There were plenty of people who did not go and watch and be bystanders. And okay, maybe you had to be a bystander.
Not in the
but
family.
anyway,
Not in the family.
But the point is, and this was the sort of dance of making this film work.
Right.
For her, it's about her father. For her, it's about love and about about reckoning with the duality of human nature and the fact that somebody can be both good and evil and that somebody can do something awful and you can still love them. And, so that's
Right.
her part of it. The other part, as far as the greater subject matter of the film goes, I don't actually care what her father actually did. Mm-hmm. Her experience of her father and her feelings that led her to explore all of this and discover this about her family and make her family accountable. If that can be a proxy for everybody else who did do it, then that's fine with me. And it's fine with her. And it's not because she's throwing her father under the bus, because she really loved him. Mm-hmm. And she wants to keep loving him. Mm-hmm. And yet she needs to tell the truth about it in order to keep loving him.
But you tell me if I'm remembering correctly, and one more question, then we will open it up. That he didn't sit around and use the N-word, and that she had black friends over to the house, and right?
She had a black boyfriend once, and they wouldn't let her go out with him. I mean, her mother actually was racist. This is a whole other part of the story. Her mother...
Right, but the father didn't say...
He did not express racism to her. Right.
Which I thought was one of the most surprising things about... I was shocked that he did not mention having been there.
That's what I think.
Oh,
That
I'm
is
not-
what... The biggest surprise to me...
She didn't tell.
He couldn't talk about it.
That he didn't tell the
So
story.
that's the gap.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm not
Yeah.
surprised he didn't tell her that he'd taken part in the lynching. I think he probably did feel terrible
he didn't
about
say,
it.
I saw a lynching once. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I saw a lynching once.
He probably
Particularly
wanted to
after
bury
you
it.
go to see To Kill a Mockingbird.
Well, listen
so what do you
to-
talk about
no,
after the drive-in? He said,
li-
one time, it's a horrible thing, but your grandfather actually
But
participated.
this
You
is
see
what
I mean?
happened with Roxy Bolton and why I didn't have any information for Jan about it. I don't know how the New York Times knew about it, but I know that her friends and her family in Florida did not know that she'd witnessed this lynching, including her best friend who was black and who I did interview. She was, very old and very amazing woman, and we talked about everything. And I brought up the lynching, and she said, we never talked about that. Mm-hmm. So Roxy witnessed it, and she left the South, just like Jan's father did.
Right.
And she never talked about it to her family. Her kids did not know this until her obituary.
So the bottom line is we don't know what his role was, and it's
Right.
impossible for us
Yes.
ever to gain that information. He could have played an active role. He could have held the blowtorch at a chest.
Yeah, I
Or he
doubt
could have
that.
just stood there and watched.
I think he probably stood and
So
watched.
given that indeterminacy, what is the work, the political, the psychological, sociological work that you want this wonderful film to do in the world?
I want it to make these conversations happen among white people, between white people and black people, whatever it inspires, to recognize our legacy, not to be guilty about it, but to turn it into change of some sort and consciousness of what we've taken for granted. And I realize that the biggest, most productive target audience for this is white people, because we're the people who haven't thought about this before. But yeah, so I want it to start those conversations. I want it to make people look at themselves and white people look at the assumptions they make, like, us being so surprised that regular people watched and participated in lynchings and took their kids, and that me being so surprised that my black male friend walking behind a white woman in a dark alley was more scared of her than she would be of him. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. So that's
I think that you have accomplished those goals. Give it up for Susanna Styron. Now, questions, comments. Professor Mack, Kingsley's gonna pass the mic because we're recording. He's right in the front. Ken is a professor at the Harvard Law School and a dear friend. And fishing buddy on Martha's Vineyard.
Yes, occasional. So to follow up on just that last point, I'm wondering how her family reacted. Do they just deny it? What do they react? And by extension, since this is supposed to be a conversation among white people, it's been at all these film festivals. Who's in your audience? Are they white? Are they black? Are they both?
Okay, 2 questions. I'll take the last one first. I gotta tell you, it depends on the film festival. But I was just at the Sebastopol Documentary Film Festival day before yesterday, and there was barely a black person at the whole festival. There were a couple films on black subject matter, and the filmmakers were there. But I texted Connie the first night and said, "There's not a black face in sight in this room." It was the open night party. I was kind of shocked, but that's Sonoma County, California. So the festival audiences have honestly tended to be white, and I think and there's a lot of segregation in the festival world. I mean, there are black film festivals, so that's been the case. But
are you going to show it on the Vineyard in the African American Film Festival?
It didn't get in. They didn't take it. I submitted it. They did not take it.
I had forgotten that.
Yeah. But on the screenings we've had, like this, the one-off screenings that have been, for the general public. Again, it depends on the audience, but we've had a much larger black population in those audiences, and I've been, and there have been a lot of questions and comments, and so that's been that makeup. What was your first question?
Yeah, the reaction.
She doesn't. Her brother is still around, and I didn't interview him because, first of all, I wanted to keep it to her story, but also he has a lot of memory issues now. But he's thrilled by it because they did this together. The Uncle Robert died, the one who said justice is done. So he's not around. His kids are really her only family, and the family in the South. And that was a big concern for her because she's friends with them. They're her cousins.
Right.
I tried to get her to get in touch with her. She has a cousin, his daughter, and I actually wanted to film it. I wanted to have her call her and talk to her. And she didn't really know how to reach her. There were Facebook friends, and she reached out to her on Facebook and didn't get any response. So, long answer to a short question, her family, she doesn't have any family that's seen it except her brother who's in the north and, on her side of this. But it's a good question. I'd love to know.
Well, what do you
the answer.
imagine that when, sooner or later, they're going to see this? And what is going to be their reaction, do you imagine?
I don't imagine that Uncle Robert's daughter is going to be very happy about it.
Probably
And that was Jan's fear, but she also overcame that fear. She said, this is more important than that.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Her children, though.
Oh, her children love it. Jan's 2 kids came to she doesn't travel very far. She wouldn't come all the way to Boston from Vermont, but she came to the Berkshire Film Festival in the Berkshires with her kids. Yeah.
One time I did the family tree of Jeffrey Canada, and you all know Jeffrey Canada. And we tracked down the white man who owned his great-great-grandfather. And Jeffrey has a significant amount of European ancestry. And the only way to determine if Jeffrey descended from the slave owner was if the direct descendants of the slave owner took a DNA test. So we tracked them down. An older woman and her brother. The brother lived in Alabama. His sister lived in Virginia. They were like 80 years old, right? The brother in Alabama just hung up the phone.
Wow.
They never call back here. So I decided to use a different approach with the sister. Hello, Miss So-and-so. I'm Professor, I'm friends with Oprah Winfrey. Do you why?
That's the way to...
I swear to God, first person we ever did Finding Roots was Oprah Winfrey. I love Oprah Winfrey, she said. I'm going to send you the DVDs. This is way back of the thing. So you could sneak up on this idea. And we are trying, and I sent a description of who Jeffrey Canada was. And all he wanted to know is if your great-great-grandfather impregnated his great-great-grandmother in slavery times. And the only way we can prove that is if you spit in the test tube that I'm going to pop in the mail after I give you 2 weeks to think about it. She said, okay. And I waited 2 weeks, and I called her, and I said, did you watch Oprah and Finding Rich? She said, yes, I did. I liked it. And I said, you read about Mr. Canada? She said, yeah, he's doing a very good thing. I said, will you spit in the test tube? She said, no way.
Whoa.
And I said, why? I was so shocked because I'd done everything right. She said, because it would embarrass my daddy. And I said, ma'am, your daddy is dead. I said that in a nice way. And it wasn't about a daddy. It was about her daddy's daddy's daddy. And she said, I know, Dr. Gates, but it would embarrass my daddy. I'm not going to do it. I wish you luck. Goodbye. And that was it.
Wow.
And that's,
That's
guilt, shame,
the
whatever.
opposite of accountability.
But there you go. Questions, comments?
Yes, there is one right there.
I have one.
In the microphone, please.
Yeah, and then there's one behind.
Yes, I am so glad that you
class.
did this and brought this out and are talking about this because I live in a senior village. I am the only African American that lives there. And so people come at me with stereotyping. They just blurt out stuff, stereotyping and not knowing what they're talking about. And they totally separate themselves from slavery, anything to do with slavery. They're not a part of it. But they want, they don't want to accept the fact that everything that they have inherited and all their generational stuff that has lingered down, for some reason that didn't come from slavery. So I think that this is something they need to hear. I mean, because they're all academians, they're all smart people. They want to we have classes, so they want to take all the Black History classes, and they still come out with the same analogy.
Wow.
Sure.
And I have to give history lessons every day. And I'm just really, but I think they would listen to you.
Okay.
And this
We'll
story.
come show the film.
And I'm sure Jewish people must feel that way about the Holocaust, too. They have to keep talking about it and explaining about it, exploring its contours.
Sometimes, because we was talking about the Holocaust one day, and when I explained to them that Hitler had sent people to America
To study, Jim Crow is true.
and took it back to
Germany.
Germany to do on Jews. They was all shocked.
Yeah, no, it's true. But I disagree with you that it's for white people. It's for black people too. Look how big, look at all the black people there who are riveted. I mean, what we might be asking of the film and seeking answers to might be different.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can racialize it that way.
Okay.
That I don't think it's a film for. I think it's a film for human beings. It's a film about memory. It's a film about shame. It's a film about guilt.
It's a film about love.
Love, yeah. Betrayal.
Betrayal, yeah.
You know, we could make a list of things that this film, bearing witness, right? Courage, taking a risk,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Well, and everybody, no matter what their
A daughter
race
paying
has,
homage to her daddy.
you know, no matter what your race, I think there are very few people who haven't found out something horrible about somebody they love and have to figure out, you know, how to live with that and
Sure.
what to do with that. Yeah.
Questions, comments.
I'm a fifth-generation Floridian and a biographer, and I have lots of thoughts about this, but two questions for Susanna. One, have you been to Mississippi? I loved your pictures of the trees with the Spanish moss.
I have been to Mississippi,
Yeah,
not with this film, but I'm glad you asked because the film did show in Mississippi. I couldn't go, but Connie, our executive producer, went to represent the film, and that was last month, and we won the Best Documentary Award.
Wow,
Congratulations.
The Magnolia Film.
So wait a minute. So you sent a black woman to the state with the most lynchings, and you stayed on Martha's Vineyard or in Brooklyn Heights or somewhere. That is the coldest shit that I ever heard in my whole life. And Connie, you dumb enough to go.
I did it, and I actually went to Duck Hill too.
Yeah, she went and she.
And that's why they gave you an award for courage. They go, man.
One more question. Have you done anything in Chicago? I'm just thinking with Ida B. Wells.
Oh,
Who
There-
fought lynching? Who fought for the lynching bill?
yeah.
I
good
fact-checked a biography of Ida B. Wells and learned a lot about her.
Well,
And she's got people in Chicago. Plus, they're all the great migration people.
I would love your ideas. We are, and everybody's, you all have a card on your chair, and my email address is on there. That team email goes directly to me. But because we're about to.
Ida Wells' best friend was lynched in Memphis. She was the editor of a newspaper, right? And then she got
Editor
run.
of several newspapers, and a suffragette who wasn't allowed to march with the whites. Anyway, she's amazing. But Chicago is a place to
We're
show
about to
this.
start what's called an impact campaign. We're going to send the film out to, before we start educational distribution, we're going to, broaden its footprint by having one-off screenings in museums and universities and community groups. And we're building a list of those now. So if anybody wants to email me with any ideas about that, please do, because we'll be, or anybody you know.
Next question. Brother Harry,
Brother Skip.
fire away.
Miss Styron, thank you for your film and for your ideas. My name is Harry Allen. I'm an Nasir Jones Hip Hop Fellow here at the Hutchins Center. I think you're right. A film is actually made 4 times, and the 4th time is with the audience when you watch it.
Yes.
And I agree with Dr. Gates that if essentialism means that a black PhD or graduate student can't write about John Milton, then that's wrong. But in your statements, you said, I wanted a black editor. And I think that you stated very well. That is to say, that could be reduced to the question, am I missing something? And that's why you wanted a black editor. It's not so much that a white editor couldn't have done the job, but you wanted the sensibilities of a black editor because of racism. Racism makes people see things differently. Right. And I agree with Dr. Gates that white slavers and black African traders were both participated in the slave trade. The difference is that whites practiced chattel slavery and blacks did not.
Yeah, well, nobody knows what that means, Harry, but that's. Anyway, the important thing he asked, though, is about the editor. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting. Could there not have been a white person with that sensibility? You know, it's not biological.
No. No, but it's cultural and it's experiential. And, you know, she, and it's also why I needed to, when I started editing myself, but you always do this, I needed to show it, you know, you show it to people, and I needed to show it to Black people. It's also why Connie is my executive producer. I specifically went to her, first person who got involved in the film, because I was like, I can't do this without a Black perspective, because I'm going to dig a hole for myself. And so, you know, and Connie has, you know, pushed back on all sorts of things that I started to do that I thought were okay that weren't. But I'll just give you one example of the editor. Originally, in my first reel, I had footage when, you know, she's talking about I'm descended from people who stopped the hearts. I had footage of the Klan. Mm-hmm. When she came in to read, that was just my little reel that I started with to raise money. And so we started with some of that material, looking at it. And she said, why is it the Klan? It wasn't the Klan. And I said, no, but you know, that tells people, so, you know, that's the imagery. And she said, I'm sick of giving the Klan all that credit. They didn't do it. It was so no.
Yeah, well, thank God.
We're not putting Klan footage in here. And I was like,
that's
okay.
tough.
Yeah.
But as you can see,
I mean, that's just one example.
But it's a mistake to totalize Black people. There are 47 million Black people, 47 million ways to be Black. Harry and I disagree every week. Uh-huh. You know, so there's not a Black perspective. It would depend on the Black person you chose.
But, you know, I might
right?
hire a female, I mean, I've hired I might hire a female editor because I'm doing a film about women, or I might hire, you know, there are qualities you look for in anybody or I might hire a male editor because I was doing a film about women. You know, it's a perspective that you develop about perspective. Like what can somebody else bring to this that I don't bring to it? And how does this fit into the, you know, mosaic of what we're trying to do here?
But this poor man who suffers from these horrible migraines does not speak for 47 million people. That's all I'm saying.
No, he's not. But no, he's not. He's just speaking for people who are not surprised about the news about lynching, or that her father would have taken part in one.
I think everything in this film is surprising, right? It's not a film about, this is not a film that is revealing the long buried secret that Black people were lynched. Right. Everybody knows that, right? It's a film about something else. Confession, guilt, all that list of things that we said. So when you say, Black people say to you, oh, we know that, then they're not watching the film, because that's not what the film's about. This is not a film about the history of lynching.
Good,
it's a film about a daughter and her father and
that's a good point.
the discovery and all of that. That's all I'm trying to say.
But it was very helpful that got said to me, because then we got to that point at the end of, you know, to a Black person, this is no news, because that's something important for the white members in the audience to recognize about it.
Alfred, can you get the microphone? Wait for the mic.
He said,
Yeah,
it's being recorded.
It's for
uh-oh, I heard a watch what he said.
So many things are moving in my mind, but first of all, I think it's important in a time and in a climate and where we stand as a country, where a large percentage of people in charge want to even deny that the sun comes up in the east.
Yes, absolutely.
And they will argue about it. They are taking away.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they are teaching, 4 plus 4 is 8 anymore.
Right.
Because they are, in the wildest ways, politicizing and erasing not only the facts of what has happened and publicly happened, but they are going straight at that. It doesn't make me feel good. Mm-hmm. It's not whether it's factual or not. It doesn't, whatever makes me not feel good. So it is a very revolutionary thing to examine yourself, your community. And it doesn't mean you don't know what you're going to find, but just the act of a society, communities reflecting. Mm-hmm. And so this is a very dangerous thing to put in the atmosphere, but it's sizzling hot and going into these murky waters. So there's a whole lot of things to say about it, but I am just pleased that we are talking about it, that we're talking about exam. Doesn't matter whether he did it or not, he was present, and he stands for a whole bunch of other people, because it was de rigueur to take your kids and everybody and eat at the lynching.
Sure.
So that's important for all of us to accept as part of what we are capable of, because whatever any human being is capable of, another is. And we want to say,
That's
true.
right.
I could never be or whatever. You don't know what you could be.
That's right.
And the other thing is, because we have not been good at seeing each other fully realized as particular human beings and therefore as groups, when we tell stories, you just don't go get a Black editor. She wouldn't even be your friend if she wasn't top flight at what she did. So she can't speak for 47 million, but for so long, the dominant culture has said, let me tell you about yourself.
Right.
Let me tell you about this.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
That's
We're
right.
going to do the Skip Gates story, and nobody in it
Right.
has ever met him, seen him, knows anything about Virginia.
Right.
And so it is one thing we have learned to do, and it gets overused after George Floyd's murder. Also, the truth is, the dominant culture can't tell the difference between us as artists. They can't differentiate. They do go and get, if they're looking to, whoever they're looking to placate for a moment, they just start snatching people. Mike Tyson might be directing me.
Sure.
It doesn't matter. It's
No, I know, yeah.
So it is, but we always need collaborators when we're telling stories, because storytelling is a communal activity. So what you do, you need somebody there to say, hey, man, hold up, Rev. And so that person could see something that you hadn't thought of. And you're not saying don't, okay, my white friend Susanna, I'm telling you about those Klan things, but you need somebody there to say, let me tell you what I see, what I think when I see that. Is that what you want to say in this moment?
Right.
And it's so, and that's why we live together, create together, marry, make families, is because we're bringing something that we don't have. They're bringing flavor to our lives. Anyway.
And I want to say two things about that. I just have
Okay.
two things I want to say. One is that I've spent my entire career hiring editors, and I interviewed many Black editors. It's not just like I want a Black editor. She brought other qualities
No, yes,
to
you
it
did.
too. And
You found the first
I
Black
was like
one.
the first Black. It was like, but what you're saying is we talked about storytelling. We talked about films. We talked, it was that was required as well, is that she be someone I felt would be a wonderful editor. The other thing is about history is I cannot tell you the response I get for this film from German people who are immediately affected because German society, German kids are taught from kindergarten about the Holocaust.
Right.
And German
the
society
law.
takes
That's the law.
full responsibility for it, so it'll never happen again. And we are doing the opposite in this
Yeah,
country. I mean,
right.
we were already doing the opposite before this taking away, before this administration came in and all of these restrictions are now
Right.
happening. Already we were bad enough. Now we are trying to erase it. But it resonates so much with
Well, we all
in
caught
Germany.
the guy with the Hitler mustache pointing to the lynched
Yeah,
body.
right?
Yeah, that was good. No,
Yeah.
and it's obvious. Look at all the black people that you consulted. I mean, Connie and I have been disagreeing and fighting for 60 years. And and I really appreciate that. And you took, I really pushed you hard on the question of how do you establish, how do you know how complicitous the 18-year-old boy was? Are there levels of complicity?
well,
You
and
have to
that's
pull the trigger
that's-
if you're watching the murder,
yeah.
right?
And that's what
And
any
the law does distinguish between those people, right, Ken?
You could be an accessory.
Yeah, but that's different than pulling. You get sent to jail, but for less time.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
But that's what
See?
you want when you're making a film is people who are going to challenge you and question you and make you think about what you're doing and reassess and
you did
deal with it.
I don't
Yeah.
think we could top Alfre's final statement. So,
Oh,
ladies
okay.
and gentlemen, I think we should give it up for Susanna.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I tried.